Hello guys! Today I'm going to show you how to decorate a Minecraft interior in 10 easy steps. Before we start, I want to give two notes. One, all these steps are essential, but the order that you do them in is going to be according to your own preference. This is just the order that makes sense for me. And two, this is about the logic that I use when I'm trying to make good, internally consistent builds. So this isn't going to be about things like optimal furnace placement in a survival build. It's more about creative decorating and making a build feel interesting and lived in for players to walk through. Before we jump into it, these are the 10 steps in the order that I'm going to go through them. So, number one, before you even start building your exterior for a build, you have to decide the purpose for why you're building. This is going to come down to a few things. Number one, if you're playing in survival, you might be building something to have an actual purpose. Maybe this is your super smelter, maybe it's a creeper farm, maybe you're building a spawn point for your players to spawn into the world at. But whatever it is, when you're building in survival, you usually have a pretty good reason for doing so. As a creative builder though, there are a lot more reasons why you might be building something. Maybe you're like me and you're trying to just fill a space in your world. I had this big city over here and this empty plain that's been sitting here forever, so I wanted to come in and fill up the space. On the other hand, you might be building for lore reasons. Maybe you built a town and you realized it doesn't have a castle and you feel like there should be some big wealthy guy who owns all the important things in town. If we're talking a little bit about real life, maybe you're building because you've been feeling really creative or you want to try out a new technique. Figuring out the purpose behind your build is the first step to coming up with a good interior. This build is purely decorative and it's in my creative world, so for me, the goal of this interior is just to be something really pretty and cool to look at. This leads me to number two, the exterior. Now, some of you are going to build inside out, you're going to build the interiors first and then the exteriors, but that's pretty rare. Most of the time what people do is they build a cool exterior and they want to fill it with something. The reason why I'm talking about this in an interior tutorial is because the exterior is really going to shape the interior. Going to shape how many floors you have, for instance. It's going to change how wide you can make the walls on the inside. And whatever style you went for on the outside, in this case I'm going for kind of a French chateau style, is probably going to determine what kind of furniture and what kind of furnishings you're going to put on the inside of your build. Having a nice, solid build that you're happy with is a really important step to making a good interior. Now, number one and two were mostly about preparation, but number three is where we're going to actually come inside of this building here. So if I drop down into the gardens and head inside, we can come in here and see that there is already some kind of a structure in place. A structure really just means the bones of the build. How many floors do you have? How big are the rooms? You should ideally be trying to make this on some kind of an odd number. In this case, I went for evens just because I wanted this even door. But most of the time I'm building on odds. I'm going to try and figure out where my windows are in relation to each other and to the inside of the room, how high the floor should be compared to the ceiling. Structures where you're also going to figure out if you want your walls to be 1 block thick, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, however thick you want them to be. In this case, I've opted for 2 so that we have a wallpaper layer inside of the stone layer. And if I fly up through the ceiling, you can see that on the second floor, the structure mimics the first floor. The walls are set in just a little bit to give us a little bit more room inside of here and here, because I think these are probably going to be bedrooms. And then if we come up again, you can see that the structure stays consistent. These are basically our load-bearing walls. They're holding up the ceiling and they're holding up each other. So they're all more or less lined up across all 3 floors. Another important thing I like to do when I'm determining the structure is to create an interesting roof system. Now, of course, you can just have a flat roof. You could just stretch these across the entire way, but I like to go for something that shows the trusses in the ceiling. Now, the reason that I've chosen a chateau specifically for this video, but it is during the structure phase that I have decided that this is going to be some kind of salon or parlor where people come and hang out. This is going to be my entrance room. This room here is going to be some kind of dining room, I believe. This tower is going to be mainly for getting up between floors. This is going to be my kitchen. This is going to be the first bedroom. This is going to be a bathroom, another bedroom, and then up here is going to be a mix of storage and where the servants sleep. Step 4 is going to be figuring out the flow of your build. Now, I don't mean this in the feng shui sort of way, but in the physical way that players will move through your build. Now, this is going to kind of depend on the purpose, which is why that step comes first. As a creative player, the flow that I want to encourage is something that is kind of slow and thoughtful. Maybe you're just building an interior for parkour, and the only part you really care about is the flow of the build and how somebody can move through it as quickly as possible. If you're trying to build something really grand, you're going to want to have a lot of big, open, straight lines, or if you want something really cozy and cottagecore-y, you're going to want to have a lot of twists and turns and cramped interiors. But this is where the tutorial is going to really start, because I haven't fully figured out the flow for this build yet. So what we're going to do is take a couple of wool blocks and start blocking out the interiors. So here we are. We're coming into this opening space, and I feel like we should have something really big and greeting here. So I'm thinking maybe some sort of big couch under the window. Of course, we want to have a couple of end tables. And this still leaves us a lot of space here. I think on the sides here, we're going to want some kind of storage, maybe for people to put their coats and hats and boots when they walk in. And I think I want it to be mostly symmetrical. So here you can see we've kind of closed off the interior, but it still stays pretty open by the window. Because we want the space to be really bright and colorful, I think I'm going to have some candles on the walls here. Now coming into this living room area, we're probably going to organize it around a centerpiece. This will kind of break up the room into two sides, so I'm thinking probably another couch over here. Some more lights, and I'm probably going to have it mirrored on this side as well. Right now, we're mostly just trying to figure out the shapes and how players are going to move through the rooms so that the actual furniture is going to come in later. I'm still not sure if I want this to be something like a billiards table or a coffee table or something else entirely. Coming into this dining room, we're going to have some more lights. This is going to be another chimney, and we need to have a big central table here in the middle. I think in order to make sure that we can access that door easily, I'm going to make it go this way instead of that way so that it blocks off less of the room. Here you can see we have our table set up in the middle. We're making sure that we have this space really open. We're probably going to have a table here under the window, and another one on this side as well. I think in the corner we could probably use a grandfather clock, maybe on this side. And maybe here we'll have a cabinet with some fine china. Since this is kind of the centerpiece of the home, I'm thinking of putting a chandelier hanging down over the table. Like so. And we're definitely going to want a painting over the mantelpiece to kind of draw the eye as soon as you get it. Although we have to make sure that we don't block it with our chandelier, so it has to stay pretty high up by the ceiling. The rest of these rooms I'm going to do off camera because I think you guys get the idea by now, and then we're going to come back in and show you how it looks. Alright guys, so using our colored wool, we have come in here and done the top floor, the kind of middle floor here, the tower. The only thing that doesn't really have an interior are this little tower and this little turret up here because they're purely decorational, basically. You can see the windows are just banners. But if we come inside, you can see that this has transformed into a little kind of intermediary space. We have a bathroom up here and another little one above us. I used lime wool here because I decided I want to kind of close off this space a little bit. This is going to be the area for the servants' quarters. This is going to be the table where they all kind of sit because we don't want them sitting with the family. And you can see that I'm trying to maintain a lot of empty sort of space where people can walk relatively easily, especially if I come down to the level below us. You can see that in here, you get a pretty good line of sight to the door there almost as soon as you enter. This is the children's bedroom, by the way. I originally had this a little bit higher, but as you can see, it kind of disrupts the visual composition of the room a little bit. So trying to pay a lot of attention to that. These are pretty big open rooms, so there's a lot of empty sort of space that we're trying to fill with the chandelier here in the middle. If I come in through here, you can see that there's going to be a piece of furniture there, and then your eyes kind of slowly follow the chimney to the bed in the corner. And above us, this has turned into a gymnasium. So kind of following like a 18th century vibe. I decided I want to put one of those kind of old-timey gymnasiums where there's like rings and hoops and like padded mats everywhere. So there aren't going to be a bunch of like barbells and dumbbells and stuff, but this is kind of a early modern workout space, which I think is cool because I've never built one before. So yeah, even though we haven't technically built any of our furniture yet, we know how people are going to move through the space, and we're trying to pay attention to what people see as they walk through the door, what's blocking their vision, what opens up, what spaces are kind of small. All these kinds of things are going to fit into the way that your build flows. Now, number 5 is light and heat. And this may sound kind of weird, but one of the things you have to keep in mind is that people like being near windows, they don't like being in dark spaces, and they like being near sources of light and heat. This kind of fits into the structure thing, but to me this is less important than flow, and flow should come first in your consideration, so that's why I put it behind a little bit here. But if we come inside, you can see that we have these big windows, we're going to have chimneys that give off light, and we're also going to have these little lights and chandeliers throughout the building. Right now we can't evaluate this super easily because we haven't installed these lights, but I'll show you what the true darkness of this room is. So if I turn down my brightness mod a little bit, you can see that this is what it actually looks like in Minecraft, and it is a little bit dark in here. When you're trying to decide where things should go, how you should put things against which walls, what rooms should have bedrooms in them, all this kind of stuff, you should really be paying attention to what rooms are going to be heated versus which rooms are going to be cold in the winter. What rooms are on which floors is also going to make a difference. So you saw that there is a gymnasium up there, which means that that room is probably going to get pretty hot in the summertime. You might want to consider having a couple of open windows, or if you're building something in, say, a desert style, you could have something like a wind catcher to funnel air through the building. If you're building a place like this where things are going to get pretty cold in the winter, you want to make sure that every bedroom either has a fireplace or is near a room that does, because otherwise it's going to be pretty unpleasant to spend the night in. Alright guys, so we did our lighting pass, and now if we come inside of here, you will see that every room is pretty nice and bright. So we have a mix of little lights, big fires, and tons of natural light coming in through these windows. And these look even better with shaders on, but I'm not going to use any shaders in this video because I want it to be accessible. All this is stuff that you guys can do. That being said though, if you are playing in creative and you want to have more light without adding a ton of candles everywhere, what you can do is get a couple of light blocks. I like to typically go for about 12 and go around your candles and just stretch out the amount of light that they give out a little bit. So if you see, the shadows on the walls here are just slightly receding away as we add in a little bit of light. Now, number 7 is a pretty simple one, but it's really important, and it is occupancy. So occupancy just means how many people are actually living in or at least using this building. This is mostly to do with things like scale and consistency. So if you're building a huge city and you have a single church, it should be a church that has enough space for everybody who lives in the city. Or you could have a bunch of smaller churches. If you're building a house like this, you should think about how many people live here and if they actually have enough space to live here. In the master bedroom here, you can see that there is one bed that's meant for 2 people. If we come inside to here, there is a children's room, which is meant for about 2 to 3 people, maybe 2 to 4. If we come up here, you can see that there are 6 beds for servants and there is no guest bedroom. So the servants have their own bathroom, and the family has a bathroom here. There's about 10 people who live here, so I think 2 bathrooms is fair. If you're going to have more people, you probably want to include more bathrooms into your builds. On the other hand, you also want to make sure that there is enough space around the dining table. So we said that there are probably around 4 to 6 family members, so I think it makes sense to have the dinner table sit 8 people up here. But since we don't want these servants eating with the family, the servants have their own dining table up here, and it's smaller because it's a bit more cramped and they're all kind of stuck together. If we come to this part of the house, you see that there is a small kitchen that doesn't have a lot of storage space, so I'm considering making this room something of a pantry where this is going to be a big shelf lined with tons of jars and pots and stuff, in order to make sure that we have enough food to feed all 10 people who live here regularly. If we come outside, you'll also see that there are some nicely tended gardens, which kind of indicate what the servants do with a lot of their time. So I think it makes sense for a place of this size to have 6 servants. But again, this is really thinking about scale and consistent scale. Now, number 7 here is material culture, and this is the big one. This is what most people think about when they think about what do I need to do to fill an interior. Material culture basically means the actual stuff inside of a house. I'm using kind of an archaeology, anthropology term here, but for a very good reason, which is that the furniture that you put into your houses should be specific to a time period, to a culture, to a status, to whatever. Let me come inside and I'll show you a little bit about what I mean. So in here, we've already done the blocking, the structure, we've figured out how much light and warmth should be in this place, but now we have to actually decide what the furniture should be. Now this is a pretty upper class place, and it's supposed to be around 18th century, so what I want to include are things like sofas and expensive looking woods. Material use is going to be a really big part of material culture, so using woods like dark oak, cherry, mangrove, acacia, and bamboo are going to look a lot more upper class than using things like oak and spruce, which tend to look a bit dustier, or even jungle wood, which looks like a really dusty floorboard look. Alright guys, so I've done some pretty minimalistic detailing in here. Mostly what I've just done is put in some furniture. And I want to show you one thing, really specifically, which is this side here, we have a couple of beehives looking like wooden drawers. We have this big wooden bench sort of thing, and we have a lantern. And then this side, we have a big leather couch with a couple of mangrove side tables with golden handles. And this is why I really want to emphasize the whole material culture thing. If you're building a mansion, you want to make it look rich. So you want to try to think about what kind of furniture gives off that kind of rich vibes. I think big leather couch, golden handles on the furniture, sort of like a deep exotic wood look, big pieces of black marble, and that kind of stony vibe on the inside really gives off a good feeling. Having really big paintings does too. Versus having something like this is kind of like plain wooden exposed beigey colors doesn't give off that feeling as much. So I'm going to go through, decorate the rest of this place out with the kind of material culture that it deserves, and then I'll come back and I'll show you and point out some of the really important bits of it. Alright guys, so I have gotten all of the furniture in place. I've avoided trying to put in too much detail everywhere because that is one of the next steps we're going to talk about. But I want to go through and show you basically what each room looks like before we go in with all the detail. So this is our entrance room. We got a couple of coat racks and a leather couch. I've realized that the bathtub is going to drip a little bit, or I think it's the sink actually. That's going to be problematic. Anyway, in here we have our dining room. We have a grandfather clock, a big china cabinet, huge table, and the kind of centerpiece to draw your eye is this painting. If we come into here, we have sort of a miscellaneous sort of storage room, because it connects to the kitchen. Kitchen has a bit more detail than most other places, just because that's kind of, I guess, how I detail kitchens anyway. If we come up here, though, we have a small little library. This leads us into the children's room. It's still pretty plain because I want to do a kind of play area in the middle here. But you can see kind of what I'm talking about, trying to incorporate a lot of these sort of dark colors, the kind of swirly patterns, a lot of paintings everywhere, making sure things are light, trying to include little highlights of like gold and blue and red. Another thing is to try and make it look a bit richer. I've tried to use the logs instead of spruce planks for the floorboards in order to make it look like it's just like big old pieces of wood that were chopped down. You know, this is all like old growth forest stuff, basically. If we come into here, we have a little bathroom, and I'm going to have to fix that drippage, but we have a toilet. Again, trying to situate this in a specific time and place. This is like a rich kind of 1800s house, so we have a high tank toilet. This is our balcony. This leads us to viewing the city in the distance. And over here, as soon as you enter, you're greeted with this big, bright wardrobe. And I've tried to use yellow in order to really catch the eye as soon as you get in, but then you kind of follow around and you can see the rest of the room, this being the master bedroom. If we follow things up, I'm going to just fly through the floor here. We have the servant's room, which is very plain and gray. Here we're using a lot of spruce to kind of hammer home that this is not necessarily cheap furniture, but it's not nice. This isn't a fancy place. Even the fireplace is made out of a different material up here. They have another bathroom. And here I bricked up the entrance because I wanted to kind of show that maybe this place had changed over time a bit, and this wasn't originally this kind of room. Maybe it used to be for more servants, or maybe it used to be for something else entirely. But today it is a gym. So we have a couple of mats on the floor for doing exercises. We have a sort of rubber ball here that I tried to make into a basketball using banners. Got a couple of these big hoop things that you can swing on for gymnastics, as well as I don't know what to call it, but a sort of horse here. So you're supposed to put one arm on either side and kind of swing back and forth. We have a little water tank with a couple of cups, and over here we have our weights. So this is what it looks like once we've gotten all of our material culture into the build, basically. You can see that this is kind of finished, but there are some spaces where it's really not quite done, and this is where we're going to get into our next step. So number 8 on the list is busyness. Now, I've already kind of emphasized a little bit before that by doing things like the flow and the lighting, that's going to start to take up some of your busyness, the type of furniture you make. If you're trying to make something look really poor, you might make it look more ramshackle, or if you're trying to make something look really rich, you might make it look super detailed. So that's all part of it, but busyness really comes down to how much detail you want every room to have. There are a lot of ways to do this. So one you can actually see out here for visual busyness is texturing. So just making things not look like they have a flat face. On the inside, you can see that we did this by using a kind of wooden boards and then wallpaper design. But mostly what this is just adding little bits and bobs, things like adding things to the desk, things like ink pots. Item frames are really good for this. Display entities are really good for this. I made a video recently where I went over a ton of designs that you could use with display entities. You can also use custom heads at this point, which are going to be really useful if you want to do things like adding a roast chicken to your dinner table. But anyway, I am going to come in here and make sure that this place is busy enough but not overflowing, because I still want it to feel clean and proper. I don't want it to be a mess everywhere. Alright, so in the busyness phase, we have decided how busy we want things to be. Mostly things have stayed the same around this place. The only room that I think is really worth showing off specifically for this is the children's room, where we have added in a little chair for someone to watch over the kids. We have a bunch of playthings scattered all over the floor. And over in the corner here, we have somebody using a ladder to try to get up and dust away these spider webs, which are clinging to the ceiling with this big, long feather duster, which I think is pretty cool. But if you have reached this phase with your own build, you have successfully made a decent looking interior. Now, I hope you have gotten some sort of inspiration from what I've done in here, either in these specific designs I've shown off or the general philosophy of how I do things, but we're not quite done yet. We still have two more things to do. Now, one of them is spilling out. All of us, no matter where we live, have some sort of junk or general stuff outside. If you live in a house, look out your backyard, see what you see. If you live in an apartment, maybe it's on your balcony or on a railing nearby. But in any case, the way that humans live is not contained to individual interiors, and every good interior spills out a bit on the outside. Now, part of this is easy stuff, things like adding a gutter to your house or some sort of garden, some sort of walkway leading up to it. On the side here, I have decided to do a couple of little gardens by the kitchen, and over here we have a little area for chickens, so we have fresh eggs in the morning. But I've left this area back here completely empty because I still want to fill it with stuff that makes this place feel a little bit more human. Alright guys, so we came back in and added in a few different activities. One of them is doing laundry. On the side here we have a couple of laundry lines, although this one is broken at the moment because I just broke it. Over here we have a couple of beehives for getting honey. If we follow this around, we can get to a little picnic here with a couple of cups, melon, and a piece of cake, along with this cute little parasol design. On the side here, we have a little bit of construction work happening. You can see these stones have been falling out of the wall here, and we had to come in here, trim away a bit of the hedge, and put up some scaffolding so that we could replace it. And then the last little thing is a little bit of gardening work seems to be happening here with somebody taking out some podzol. This gets us to number 10, which is the vibe. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can try to get the vibe that you want. The reason I have it saved for last is because I think that the final feeling of a build comes through in those little details that really make things pop. For some people, this might be the application of like a resource pack or some shaders. For other people, this could be making the place have a haunted feeling. So in a build I did a while back, I used a bunch of these sort of hanging moss things to look like cobwebs, and I also used a lot of skulk to look like there was black mold everywhere. Of course, if you want to go for that haunted vibe, what you could do is also turn out a bunch of these candles to make everything nice and dim, or you could shut some of these windows with curtains. If you want to have more of a sunny feeling in here, you could also open up the windows, so that will also alter the kind of feeling you get. If you want to make this place feel really dangerous, we can come in here and add something like monster spawners and turn it into a little custom map for people to walk through. Or what you could do is come in here, punch out some of these windows, and turn it into some sort of elytra fly course. The one thing that I really want to do for this build to finish things off is to add smoke coming out of my chimneys to really tie the interior into the exterior. Alright guys, so the big thing that I did to try and tie together the vibe of this place is to add some big cartoony smoke effects that are doubled on both sides. I think it kind of fits the fairy tale vibe that I'm going for with this place, especially with it being this kind of wonderful sort of chateau area. One of the things I added was this hookah, which kind of ties it into the 18th century parlor feeling. I also added some mirrors because I was looking at reference images and there are tons of old mirrors in these sorts of places. You'll often see walls just hanging with tons of mirrors and stuff, and I added some nautilus shells because I think it adds to that kind of Victorian-y vibe where people are starting to really collect things from the natural world in order to study them. So I think all in all, we gave this place a really nice feeling, a really nice interior, and we built it layer by layer by going through the purpose of the build, the exterior, getting into some of the structural elements, blocking out the flow of the place, getting into really important things like the lighting and the heat and the actual occupancy, how many people live here, getting into the material culture, trying to give it that sort of rich 17th, 18th century European vibe, trying to make it feel busy without making it feel cluttered or overwhelmed, and then finally coming in with all these little elements on the outside that sort of spill out and inform the feeling of the place through these sort of little mini vignettes like the wavy smoke and the little flag there, little bits we did on the outside that sort of show that, yeah, people are living here and they're trying to live their daily life. And you know what? It's pretty cozy sometimes, and sometimes it needs a little bit more repair and stuff, but it is a life. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like. It would be much appreciated. Let me know if you have questions or if you want me to do another video like this in the future. You can let me know what steps you take in order to make your own interiors, and I will see you guys next time.